The riddle of the Sphinx is Eden. Our investigations of the last 4 years, reported about on this channel, will demonstrate that the Sphinx helped us to find the location of the Garden of Eden. Join us in this episode to find out how. Released from the sand in the 19th and early 20th century, travelers and investigators have not stopped marveling at the silent statue of the Great Sphinx. All the while, the reason for its existence and what it symbolizes has remained a mystery. Ancient writers suggested that it was or possessed a riddle to be solved in return for a treasure of a kind not known. What is the riddle of the Great Sphinx of Giza? Is it a question regarding the type of animal it represents? Is it a lion or a dog, as some people propose? A representation maybe of Anubis, who guards the realm of the dead? Is it a question regarding which king it represents? Most Egyptologists will propose that it depicts King Khafre, who is owner of the pyramid connected to the Sphinx via the causeway beside him. But there is evidence that the Sphinx has been recarved maybe multiple times. So is this even the original face? Does the riddle concern the question of the age of the Sphinx? Does it date to the age of the pharaohs or a time long before the first king? And does geology point to an earlier time of construction, predating even the pyramids? People in the past also have wondered if the Sphinx can be associated with some of the constellations in the sky, such as Leo or maybe the dog star Sirius. Sirius was very significant to the ancient Egyptians because it heralded the start of the Egyptian New Year. From our side, we find that the mystery does have an answer, and that the Sphinx answers us directly, hiding the answer in plain sight. When we look closely at the Sphinx, study his mysterious smile, and walk around him, study him from all sides, it becomes quite evident that the riddle is not difficult to solve. We have investigated what others remarked and always wonder why they overlook that the Sphinx, who is told to be guarding a secret, is indeed not only clearly guarding a secret, but also the key to its resolution. Indeed, the Sphinx is guarding that particular secret between his paws. In the long history of this statue, treasure hunters have not resisted the attraction of this mystery and have burrowed into his body. For instance, there is a hole in his head which had to be closed off, and there are boxes positioned along his sides, of which the contents has been lost, has been stolen, or is unknown to us. And in the past, researchers have dug into and below his body. Maybe they indeed found something, but these hollow, small tunnels do not seem to hold anything today. But this does not mean we are stuck, because the real treasure is still overseen and guarded by the Sphinx. It is not symbolically the plateau that he protects behind him, it are instead the objects that he guards between his paws. That is a place where any lion or dog would guard his treasured stash. It is food for him and us to gnaw upon. All we need to do now is to decode the language in which the riddle is written. Moving closer to his torso, in between the paws, we see that in front of his chest a large stele stands erect. But moving away somewhat, closer to the exit and right between the front of his paws, we have some sort of box-like pillar, an object that will turn out to be very important, as it is, in fact, the key. But our eyes are drawn to the stele, and we will investigate this first. The stele, made of granite, 3.6 meters or 12 foot tall, and weighing 15 tons, is called the Dreamsteller. It dates back to 2401 BC. Although the bottom half of the text is missing, we have enough to understand that it recounts the story of Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose IV, who claims that, when as a prince and falling asleep below the head of the Sphinx, to have received in a dream the spoken command from the Sphinx himself to clear away the sands from around his statue. This the prince should do in return for the promise that he would become the king of Egypt for a long, successful reign. As such, the stele legitimizes the earthly power of Thutmose IV. The Sphinx, considered to be a god, even calls the young prince his son, letting the reader believe that the lineage of Thutmose is of divine origin. The stele depicts two sphinxes, one facing left and one facing right. This has led researchers to believe or propose that somewhere on the Giza plateau there is a second sphinx, still awaiting to be dug up. Others believe the second sphinx has already been located on the plateau. Although the idea has merit, I was never convinced by it, and I continued hunting. I noticed that not only the sphinxes face the opposite direction, the symbols in the text above them do this as well. As such, the symbols are mirrored. We have seen that mirrors and mirroring of patterns has been very important in our research, as it was a tool that the ancient Egyptians wanted us to use in interpreting the clues they left behind. The Dreamsteller confirms that mirroring is an important tool to solve the riddle. On the stele, we also see the Sphinx sitting on top of a box. The box too has been described as a building extending below the Sphinx, or maybe as a treasure chest. Unfortunately, the water table on the Giza plateau is quite high. It prevents extensive digging into the ground beneath the Sphinx. Likewise, any artifacts made from metals or organic matter stored beneath the Sphinx would likely have been damaged by water and oxygen. But there is a small chance they did survive, or that stone artifacts with records could have survived. Even Edgar Cayce, a famous clairvoyant from the United States in the first part of the 20th century, made popular the idea of a cache of records hidden beneath the Sphinx, so-called Akashic records. This inspired laymen, tourists and Egyptologists alike to wonder. We do not know if there is any truth to this speculation, but the idea that knowledge, an archive of sorts, had been preserved in or below the Sphinx has been popular for many, many centuries. But the drawing on the stele leaves doubt. It could be that this cache, if any such thing exists, is not hiding beneath the Great Sphinx in front of us, but beneath that other Sphinx chiseled on the stele, showing his back to the other Sphinx. What if that Sphinx was not on the Giza plateau, but somewhere else? This is a possibility we cannot confirm nor deny for now, at this point in our story, but we will do so later when we have explained to you how the key to solving the riddle of the Sphinx works and how we are invited to visually read this architecture. Notice that the stele is not the only object standing between the paws of the Sphinx. We also have this box-like ornament. Together with the stele and paws of the Sphinx, it forms sort of a little shrine, or at least we have the feeling that this grouping of objects suggests they are related to each other. Left and right we have two paws, and the stele and box ornament bridge the gap between the left and right paw. Here I first have to clarify to the first-time visitor of our channel, who still has to see the other videos, that having found the location of the Garden of Eden, and having decoded the language of the architecture used in the Great Pyramids, well, given all this, I know that 3D objects can also be interpreted as a language, or as words in a language. But how then does this language work? In earlier episodes we remarked that the pyramids, triangles pointing upwards, correspond to the symbols for the alchemical elements fire and air, which were still in use in the Middle Ages. As such, the pyramids also represented words. These couple of words did not reveal everything required to solve the mystery, but at least they gave me some puzzle pieces to start with. I wanted to explore if the same or a similar method could help in decoding the architecture and shape of the Great Sphinx, or maybe if they could help to decode the ornaments in the area between his paws, or at least find a starting point. I could not relate either the stele or stone box to any alchemical element that I had seen in the books I own, so that approach immediately was a dead end. But it would make sense that the language used would go back to ancient Egypt or the time before, maybe even belong to a cultural group that is not present in Egypt today, but from the known world at that time with which they traded internationally, such as Libya or Sudan or Sumeria, Iraq, Syria, and even Cyprus, and of course the rest of the Mediterranean basin, up to even Britannia, because of the tin trade. But maybe it could be simpler still. What if it was simply a form of ancient Egyptian demotic script, or hieroglyphic writing? I decided to find an Egyptian dictionary and look at the ideograms, the signs in which the sounds of the Egyptian language were written. I tried to find pictures showing all sides of this stone, but could not find any evident signs or markings, nor eroded remnants of such markings. I paged through the entire dictionary, sliding my gaze over all words or sign combinations, simply to get a feel for the ideograms. Feeling a bit lost, I returned to the first page of the dictionary, which showed a standardized list of 20 letters, the equivalent of our alphabet, which helps the reader navigate the dictionary. Actual hieroglyphics have more variation in the drawings and signs they use for a single sound, but I was happy that I only needed 20 signs to navigate this dictionary. But wait, we should observe that the letters in this dictionary are written in ink. Ideograms also exist as carvings into building walls, such as in the temple walls of Karnak or Edfu. When carved, they have a 3D quality to them, because of the grooves and ridges of these letters. But what if this box was not a bas-relief of letters, but still in some way a symbol or a combination of symbols, just as the pyramid was? I compared the box between the paws to the first page of this dictionary, and now I saw it. The box is a combination of ideograms in 3D. The box, thus, is a 3D representation of letters. Here, let me show you. We see a square shape, we see a rectangular shape, elongated, we see a half circle, and we see a round shape like a round or a circle, a full circle. Now, this rectangular box-like shape represents the letter P, because the hieroglyph for the letter P corresponds to a rectangular box. Thus, the cube of the ornament we see in 3D could represent this box in 2D. We also have something that is elongated like a lintel. That shape, that elongated rectangular shape, is the letter S or Sh. The half circle is the letter T or T. Now, if we combine these letters, we have something that sounds like TP-sh, typisch, TP-sh. When we look at the side of this box, we find these three letters, but when we look from above, we also find these three letters, represented by their 3D equivalent. But we don't really have any clear rule for the order of the letters, so we play around with them a bit, see which words emerge. For instance, TP, PT, TPS, PTSH, SHPT, PUSH, SHP, TPSHT, or we can try any combination or multiplication of letters. Tipishit, Tapashat, Tipishiti, Tipishiti, Tibesti. We read the word Tibesti. Now, this word is more significant than any of the other combinations, because we know that Tibesti is the site where we find the Garden of Eden. And thus we know that the riddle that the Sphinx protects is indeed the word Tibesti, the location of the Garden of Eden.